Well, then, I guess. I'm Adam Chamel.
I'm Aaron Schroeder.
There you go. This is the Quack podcast, the most official, unofficial Oregon Duck sporting podcast on the web, footosphere. And Aaron, there's been some time. I'm basically over the Ohio State Rose Bowl blowout loss.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I thought you were going to say there's been some comments.
There's been plenty of comments. Our last episode on YouTube was by far the most watched episode, and you can clearly see that it's mainly by, and I do this same thing, mainly by Ohio State fans who jumped on to be like,
yeah,
which
totally.
those,
fair.
I'll listen to a rival podcast after we humiliate them. Those are my favorite episodes.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Power to you. A lot of them are pretty
fandom. That's just part of it.
Really looking at the terribleness and there's some good people that are also Buckeye fans. It really makes me. I'm looking at this famously annoying fan base, and I'm like, they're not so different. You and I kind of feel like Duck fans, we're just as annoying. It's just we have zero
a different
national
outlook on things.
Well, and less success in football in general.
Well,
no, there's no well about it.
I mean, an undefeated division championship, I would say, is a success.
Well, they have more than us in general. Historically, they're just so much better than us.
Well, this is our first year in the Big Ten, which means we're pretty much running at 100%. So
you got that off-season Natty vibes, and I love that, Aaron. You're like, we're already almost there next season. We got it.
I
love it. Aaron, how you doing? Football's over.
Yeah. So you say, though, that you've been able to remove thyself from the game.
Well,
it no longer.
I keep thinking I'm not gonna watch, and then I end up watching everything that's coming my way. I was like, I'm not gonna watch Notre Dame, Penn State. Then I watch it. I'm not gonna watch Ohio State, Texas. Ohio State's gonna destroy Texas. Ends up being actually a really good game.
Who won? Who won?
The Buckeyes, of course.
Okay,
it was actually good. It came down to the last damn minute. Texas was like on their 2 or 1 yard line. They were down by 1 score. They do this weird
They held up better than us?
Way better than us. Better than us. And our friend Hythloday will hop on and hopefully make some sense of this, because I know a lot of listeners want to hear that. But shout out to all the Buckeye fans who hopped on last episode who are definitely not listening to this episode, because why would you?
In the comments, when you said you wanted more details and less jibber jabber, well, you missed it. Here it is.
Yeah. Here's where
this is where that stuff shines.
I know. Yeah, and this is the podcast for two dumbasses laughing at their own jokes, not really knowing what they're talking about. Occasionally, though, having on a guest.
I'm actually hyper intelligent.
I know you pretty well. That seems like a stretch. Hyper intelligent? Be real, Aaron. Hyper intelligent.
I would say I'm Einstein level.
Einstein. Say something smart right now.
E equals MC squared.
Well, that is. I don't know how to double check that, so I'm gonna take your word for it. Occasionally, we have guests that really know what they're talking about, and that kind of helps the whole thing function and flow and exist. You know what I mean? In the year of our Lord 2025. So let's bring on, from Addicted to Quack, the managing editor, Hythloday. How's it going, Hythloday?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Years ago, when anyone who knows Hythloday's origin story, it's all about he wanted to make sense out of this chaotic world that is college football.
So he went to Reddit.
That'll rip out your heart and stomp on it. So he went to the stats. He went to the film. To make sense of it. And I will say, this is the awesome part about what you do, Hith, is even in this game, which did shock me. I'm talking about the Rose Bowl. it did shock me, the results, but at the same time, it wasn't like out of the realm of possibility. Like, it didn't completely blindside me, because a lot of the ways in which that butt kicking occurred, you did kind of circle, well, it's like, well, this could happen. Like, our secondary could get exposed if our defense were to play this kind of style here. Then Ohio State could really take it to us very quickly, and that kind of happened. The Rose Bowl results, by the end, when you were finished watching this game, Hith, were you like, well, yeah, that was a possibility, or was there a specific thing that kind of, I guess what I'm trying to say is, who do we fire Hythloday? Who's the first person we fire on this staff?
Oh, you haven't moved on. You're still hot. You're still hot about it. I thought you said you moved on.
Someone's got to go. Is it the ball boy? Is it our defensive
Somebody's got to go, he says.
Our offensive coordinator? Is it Dan Lanning himself? Do we need to cut Phil Knight from the program? Is that the problem? Who's getting fired, Hythloday? That's my real question.
I'm not a big fire everybody kind of person. And well, let me first, say, I
asked you 5 questions, so I want those answers.
Well, let me first say, to the point that you were making about, the way that the game went down. Was this a sort of a scenario that I saw coming? Oh yeah, definitely. That I guess in a sense, I'm glad to hear you say that, because it means I did my job. That this was a scenario that I thought there was basically about 3 different ways that the game could have gone down, and that this was one of them. Based on there was one factor that I didn't see that there was one factor that I didn't see coming that supercharged this scenario, and that
Jordan
was
James.
that was that Evan Stewart okay.
Yeah, there's a lot.
On the defensive side of the ball, that happened was definitely a possibility. I thought a strong possibility. It was partially informed by Oregon making defensive choices that I thought they shouldn't make, but largely informed by just the situation that Oregon was in for this season. That wasn't, because if you have been paying attention to Oregon's roster transformation, the defensive back situation was a year behind the transformation, everywhere else. That, they had their defensive back room was 3-star veterans, not, a blue chip, youngins. The blue chip youngins weren't ready yet. That's going to be 2025.
Yeah.
And beyond.
We could pull 10 clips of you saying throughout this whole season that like so many positions for Oregon's roster, it is like a factory where it's like there's young talent perfectly ready to take over, become veteran talent, right when the others going hopefully the NFL, except for the secondary. The lights haven't turned on in that part of the factory yet. Like,
right. And
over and over. Yeah.
And I was saying that, going back to when Oregon took their transfer class, and so it's like, it wasn't quite one full year going back to January 1st, but, close on, is almost a full calendar year of me saying, like, if Oregon loses a playoff game, it'll look exactly like this. So it's like, man, oh man, like, not exactly Cassandra, but like, having whatever the opposite of sugar plum fairies, dreams, dancing in your head for a full year. Yeah, that's what I had. I had visions of this Rose Bowl dancing in my head for about a year.
And about seemingly the only team that could fully do this to us feels like Ohio State. Like, right now in the playoffs.
There was a certain poetry to it being Ohio State, because speaking of my origin story, that was, why I first just started doing film study in the first place, was the Rose Bowl at the end of the 2009 season. So the January 1st, 2010 Rose Bowl, the Terrell Pryor one, as I realized that I didn't really understand anything about Ohio State, and, digital video had sort of taken over. It was available. And I, did a bunch of film study on Ohio State, and I learned all about them, and I saw what was coming, and
hopefully this is that for Tosh Lupoi,
So anyway, yeah, that scenario I sort of saw coming. I think that there were different. I'll unpack this a bit, in a second, but just as a little overview, I think there were some different defensive choices that Oregon could have made that would have softened the blow, that maybe wouldn't have accelerated this, so that the game was effectively over in the first quarter, and would have given Oregon a chance to fight back and maybe made it a game, maybe made it competitive, give themselves maybe a 20% chance of winning. Instead, I think Oregon defensively made some choices I wouldn't have made. And, that doesn't mean I think, fire Tosh Lupoi. I don't think that should be, I'm not, like I said, I'm not a big fire everybody guy.
So Will Stein,
but but ultimately, given the athleticism in Oregon's backfield, and given the matchup there, and given that Ohio State had decided to unleash those things, which was sort of a difference that they had made in the last couple of games in the season. That was, in my film, preview of Ohio State, I'd sort of, look, they sort of changed that around. It wasn't a huge difference, but they did, make some different decisions on their first down and third down play calling. It's actually not. I'll unpack that a little bit later too. It was that was to extent, in the cards. The thing that supercharged it is then the offensive performance. The offense, did not allow Oregon to stay in the game. There's some people who are debating whether or not the rust factor, being off for such a long period of time, contributed to that. Yeah, there's some bobbled catches. It's difficult to assess that. I have a hard time really buying that. I think the larger factor is this. And the fact that the factor that I couldn't predict, which is Evan Stewart didn't play in this game.
Yeah.
This is the equivalent of not having Jeremiah Smith. And I know that a lot of Oregon fans are sort of scratching their head about why isn't Evan Stewart getting more catches during the year? If he's so great, why does he only get a couple of catches? And the answer is it's just not how football works. And I'm going to jump ahead for a second about a game that we'll talk about a little later in the podcast, which is last night, Ohio State played Texas. Jeremiah Smith had one catch for 3 yards.
Yeah.
Right.
Much more mortal.
So Ohio State fans all over, you look over at Twitter, right now, there are about 1 million Ohio State fans who tweeted out about 1 billion times, why aren't you throwing the ball to Jeremiah Smith? Chip Kelly's a dumbass. Because casual fans think there's a throw the ball to Jeremiah Smith play, the score a touchdown play. Why isn't he pressing the score a touchdown button? Don't you understand that there's a, because of course there's no such thing as the score a touchdown button, there's no such thing as the throw the ball to Jeremiah Smith and win the game, button. It has to do with the, defensive coverage structures and the answer, and so anyway, the reason why Jeremiah Smith would or would not be open has to do with how you're covering him. And the same thing is true of Evan Stewart. Defenses reacted to the presence of Evan Stewart by devoting extra defensive resources to covering Evan Stewart. And just like Texas last night devoted extra resources to covering Jeremiah Smith, which opened up stuff in the middle of the field, which is why Ohio State was attacking the middle of the field. It's why you saw 1 million throws to G. Scott, who's an absolute bum of a tight end, right? But they had to throw those balls to him. that's what the effect that Evan Stewart has on the defense, because he takes the top off the defense. Defenses have to respect that. They have to devote extra resources to that. And so, of course, the ball's not going to him. Defenses are covering him. They're devoting, they've got an extra safety back there. And that's what opens up stuff, underneath. And that's why Oregon's making all those throws underneath. That's why Tez Johnson is always open, or Trayshawn Holden is always open, or Terrence Ferguson is always open. It's because Evan Stewart did that work, to open all that stuff up. And if defenses ever get sick of that and are like, you know what, I'm going to take that safety down to try to deal with that. That's why those running lanes, for why Jordan James, or Noah Whittington can get some extra yards after the run, is because Evan Stewart, opened that stuff up for them. And if defenses ever get sick of that and come bring that safety down, deal with that. Oh, all of a sudden, Evan Stewart's one-on-one with that guy, and you can hit him for a big pass. Well, there's only a couple of times when that happened. In Ohio State, the first time they played them in Autzen Stadium, was one of those times. It was kind of crazy that Jim Knowles did that, where they were not only running simulated pressures that didn't work, but they were trying to get away with we'll just play Evan Stewart out on an island because I think that Devin Burke can handle that. And it turned out that was a really dumb, that isn't going to work, Jim. And, Oregon beat them up, over it. And so fast forward to January 1st in the Rose Bowl, both of those things go away. Evan Stewart goes away, and Jim Knowles stops running simulated pressures. And what you see instead is Ohio State was getting a lot more effective pressure. They were collapsing the pocket against Oregon's offensive line, which, if there's an actual takeaway from the game, that may be it, is sort of like, Oregon has sort of some questions to answer about their offensive line, standing up here.
Yeah.
But I'll sort of put a pin in that for a little while. But the other thing is that's sort of like, oh, the game is lost before it begun, is if they don't have Evan Stewart to take the top off, and the only guy they have to take the top off is also their underneath receiver, Evan Stewart, it's like, look, you've given the game away. Like, Ohio, it's too easy for the number one defense in the country, which is Ohio State. Like, literally the number one defense in F+ is Ohio State. Oregon can't play with one hand tied behind its back against Ohio State without Evan Stewart taking the top off. Like, that's a non-trivial loss. That's about as far as you can get from a trivial loss. So if you watch Ohio State, and if you read Tristan's film study article, he basically he wrote the entire article with the Skycam angle. This is Oregon's first game on ESPN, and one of the nice things about ESPN, if you get a big game, is they'll give you the Skycam angle.
It's awesome. Highly recommend. I love watching it that way.
And so you can see the defensive structure that Ohio State is playing in. And Ohio State in this game basically has Caleb Downs playing down in the box, no pun intended. And that guy is just an absolute cheat code. He's not only like a 5-star, which, by the way, there's the difference for you, is that Ohio State's got, 5 stars in their secondary. Oregon's got 3 stars. And here's the other thing, whereas I'm, kind of, getting persnickety at, Tosh for, not playing the safeties back to take away the deep ball, not, hey, Tosh, you need to play the safeties back. You need to play the corners back. You need to, take the first thing that, if I'm giving Tosh advice, what I'm saying is you need to play the corners soft. You need to have the first thing that both of the safeties need to do is backpedal by 10 yards. You need to take all 4 of those guys need to be running backwards off of the snap to take the deep ball away so that you don't give up those huge passes. That's the first thing you need to do. And then if you've taken away those one play touchdowns, then you just deal with everything else. You dare them to march the field, right?
Right. God,
so that's exactly the defense. Right. If that's what I'm saying to Tosh. Now, guess what? Ohio State doesn't have to do that, right?
Yeah.
Ohio State doesn't have to worry about doing that. So So now they get to have their corners play up close. They get to have the best safety or the fastest safety, maybe the best safety in the country, play down in the box, while Oregon has to throw everything underneath, while Oregon has to run to the outside. And so he's just like this heat-seeking missile. And if you watched last night, Ohio State versus Texas in the Cotton Bowl, they get down. Adam, you mentioned it. Texas gets down to the goal line. They don't feel like they can run the ball. And so they run like that toss play. They lose yards. Who goes and hits? The guy who makes initial contact is Caleb Downs. Somebody else makes the actual tackle. I think it was Sonny Styles. But like, it's because they get to have, the defense is compressed, in the red zone, and look how fast that guy is, right? Well, it's like Ohio State gets to play their red zone defense, which, by the way, number one red zone defense in the country for a reason, because when the defense compresses and they get to play their safeties in the box, they're so fast laterally. It's like Ohio State got to play their red zone defense for the entire length of the field. That's why Oregon couldn't move the ball between the 20s. It's because Ohio State got to play their red zone defense the entire length of the field. So they got to be the number one defense at all spots in the field, because Oregon couldn't stretch the field because they don't have Evan Stewart. And it's like, that's what the state of Oregon's wide receiver core is when they've got gimpy Gary Bryant. They've got, who hasn't been the same since his injury. I was talking to somebody who had access to all the slingshot, whatever the GPS trackers that they wear during practice, that they can track their metrics, right? So it's like, since he got injured, that at USC in 2021, he was a super burner. Gary Bryant Jr. is the guy I'm talking about. He was a super burner. Then he got hurt. Then he transferred to Oregon, and his numbers at Oregon, he's not been a super burner. He was actually fairly productive on a per play basis, like in 2023, but like, you didn't see him running those like slot fade routes. And then it turns out that like he's just lost a step. So like, he can't be the Evan Stewart replacement because he's lost a step. They don't have Kyler Casper because he's missed the entire year. Justice Lowe isn't that guy. They're not playing the freshman. Pelham just got booted off the team because he pistol whipped the dude on Christmas. Like,
did you catch that, Aaron? We have a player who's no longer on the team because he pistol whipped someone on Christmas. He
pistol whipped the dude on Christmas, which
who did this? What?
I can't believe Oregon didn't win a national championship, with that kind of story. I mean, I read these stories from the SEC all the time.
I know.
Like, apparently, like, that's what you need.
Right.
I don't get it, man. Like, so anyway, like, I mean, that's, think about all the stuff and nonsense that Oregon's depth, being tested the entire year, where like they're missing Tez Johnson for most of the year, or much of the year. They miss Kyler Casper the entire year. They Gary Bryant's, lost a step that he misses most of the year. Terrence Ferguson, misses a bunch of games because he has appendicitis. Trayshawn Holden spits on a dude and they hold him out for a bunch of the games. They go through this offensive, like, Oregon's depth is tested for the entire year. They still manage to go 13-0, and win the Big Ten. And it's like, oh, what's your reward for this? Well, you get Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, and Evan Stewart, misses the game. And you're just like,
yeah.
I don't want to complain. Oregon had their opportunity, but it's just like, it was. You've got to be kidding me at some point. Like, it's sometimes difficult to believe that the Ducks aren't cursed.
Oh, we are. We're cursed to walk this earth. Yeah.
So anyway, that's you asked me for an explanation. That's the explanation for Oregon can't take exactly the advice that I was like, Ohio State. Right, all they're going to do is going to take the top off. The number one thing you have to worry about, and I'll circle back and expand on that in a second, but the number one thing you have to worry about with Ohio State is taking the top off. Exactly that. The inverse for Oregon. Oregon can't take the top off. All they can do is underneath. And now Ohio State gets to predate on that. They get to play like it's the red zone 100% of the time. So now Oregon's is in this trap, right? Ohio State is scoring one-play touchdown drives. Oregon has to try to march the field with underneath stuff, and they can't do it.
They did it once.
And so this, yeah, but now it's this runaway effect, and then their run game gets taken away because what happens when you're in a blowout situation?
Yeah,
you can't run the ball. And actually, I know, because if you look at the box score, it says Oregon has negative 23 rushing yards because they take a bunch of sacks. If you actually if you look at the per play statistics, Oregon is doing about the same thing that they did in the first game in terms of their per play rushing success. They're trying to get to the outside too much. Like Ohio State is too fast when they've got a dude in the box. When they ran, up the middle, they had about the same, 50-50 rush success. They probably should have pressed that more. I have some complaints about Will Stein's play calling in this game, but they're about the standard complaints that I always do. He's trying to throw screen passes too much, although I think that the screen passes kind of make sense in the context of, their limitations. He's trying to horizontally stretch. And I think they probably should have done some more vertical stretch stuff, but it's like, with what? He did the same thing that he always does, which is they go for one, sideline route to Tez Johnson. The ball literally bounces off of the cornerback's helmet because Dylan Gabriel runs out of club. And then Will Stein does the same thing he always does, which is, he never tries it again. It's, it's like, if at first you don't succeed, never, ever try again is Will Stein's motto.
That's how I play the game.
So but it's, he's operating with one hand tied behind his back, and then his run game gets cut out from under him because, he can't do that anymore because of, the game's about to run out from him. So I have, given the operational constraints, I don't have a ton of criticism for the play calling.
Going down that big, it just felt like,
they go down that big because of the personnel situation. They're simply outclassed. And once Ohio State stops making the mistakes that were holding them back, that sort of was. I would say that outcome of the game was about 80% likely, and then some play calling choices is the last 20%. I am somewhat upset about the last 20%, but I'm sort of like, oh man, I can't be that upset. I would have made some different choices. Now, as to, those different choices, I am, like I said, I probably would have done some more down the field stuff from Will Stein, and I probably would have backed, the safeties out and the corners out. I probably would have done. I had this clip in my article where I was like, "This is how you beat Ohio State's passing game. It's how Penn State played them, which is it's humble cover two. You just you have the corners play soft, you back out the safeties, and you just invite Ohio State." Given that Ohio State doesn't have a run game, and they still don't have a run game, they didn't against Tennessee, they didn't against Oregon, they didn't against Texas. If you dive the stats, they cannot run their ball. The offensive line, it's due to injury, so I don't mean to sound gleeful about this. It's simply a fact. It's unfortunate, and I'm sorry about this. I'm not trying to.
They may not feel too bad if they just win the national championship without a run game. I think they'll feel fine.
It is simply a fact that their offensive line injury situation, combined with the fact that Justin Fry is a bad recruiter and developer, and so their depth situation sucks. Their depth situation sucks, and their depth has been tested. The latter thing is unfortunate. The former thing is something that Ryan Day invited because, coaching malpractice. They can't run the ball. That's the thing that's sort of frustrating about watching Ohio State. This is not a complete offense. This is not like watching some teams that I have watched in the past in which I'm like, oh man, they've got everything. This is, the Hindu goddess of war and motherhood, Durga, who rides into war on the back of a tiger and has 1,000 arms, each with a different weapon. They've got exactly two things. They've got bombs, deep bombs, and they've got Chip Kelly misdirection plays. And if you don't fall for the misdirection plays like Penn State did, and if you don't, and if you just play your defensive backs back and you have good corners like Texas does, then you've kind of taken both of their tools away. And they're in kind of a struggle fest, which is what you saw last night against Texas. And you give yourself a shot. And what you do is you force Ohio State to march the field and dump the ball off to their crappy tight ends. And again, that's Ryan Day's fault. He really botched his tight end room. And like, I mean, I tweeted this out last night. Pete Kwiatkowski, Texas's defensive coordinator, used to be at Washington, like pulled the coaching job of the century, because what he did was he forced Ohio State to replace Jeremiah Smith targets with G. Scott targets, which is, it's like falling from Mount Everest into the Mariana Trench. It's like the farthest you can fall on planet Earth is replacing Jeremiah Smith targets to G. Scott targets. Like, that's how you do it.
As opposed to, I don't think Mount Everest is that high. I think we'll be good.
Like,
that's the other way. Yeah.
So it's like, that's my coaching criticism of Tosh Lupoi, is like, you have to take away those shots to Smith and Tate on the outside, and then just let Ohio State march the field. Because guess what? They'll make mistakes. Because Will Howard will eventually make mistakes. Chip Kelly will make mistakes by trying to run the ball when he can't. They'll dump it off to G. Scott because he's not that good, et cetera. They'll commit penalties. Guess what? They didn't commit any penalties against Oregon, but they would have if they didn't have get touchdowns on one play. Now, again, this is, like I said, it's 80-20, and I'm only talking about the 20% here,
right?
But it's still, it's
a
mistake is, a mistake is a mistake.
Yeah.
And this was a mistake. Like,
let me ask you then, Hith, because I think this is where a lot of people are going to, Duck fans are going to go to immediately. Then it's like, okay, we accept what you just said. What do you think of this secondary next season then? And I know that's a big.
Well, I haven't seen them. I don't know what to think.
But talent-wise, do you think there's
the talent's great? They've been recruiting really well, but like, I'm not a high school scout. Like, I don't know what to think about anybody till I see him play a substantial amount of college film.
Next season's going to be pretty dang interesting, where there is a lot of injection of talent. But obviously, after a season like this, we are losing some key pieces. Like you're talking about the offensive line, how this was like not a great game for them on a huge stage. Well, we're losing, some offensive linemen, and we've had a lot of talks about transfers into O-line and how that can be a troubling path.
Yep.
So next season,
I think that Oregon, we're looking way ahead here. I will just say this: absolutely nothing makes me think that Oregon is special or immune to the transfer portal effect. There is no data to make me think that. The transfer portal effect indicates that if Oregon tries to start 2 or more guys fresh out the portal, they will see a substantial downgrade in their offensive line performance. Now, there are important things to know about the transfer portal effect that is well observed across now 7 years of transfer portal data across wide spectrum. Like, this is like, I'm more certain about this than I am that the sun is going to come up tomorrow. A couple of things. First is, once a guy has been in the program for into his second year, like, the portal effect like wears off. It's why Nishad Strother, right? Like, even though he transferred in, this was his second year, so it didn't apply to him, right? And so Matthew Bedford, who came in, it wouldn't apply to him. Another thing is, you can get away with one. There is actually a tiny dent, but like, it's barely perceptible. So, they get away with one. So then the third thing that I would say is, given what Oregon's roster looks like, go ahead and take all the offensive line portal guys you want. Like, sure, taking guys has no penalty. It's not it's not the number of dudes in the room, it's the number of dudes you're starting. So like taking guys is a good idea because that like builds up your reservoir, right? It gives you buying more raffle tickets is a good idea. And from just like sketching, I haven't totally dove this, but I can assemble, I'm going to be writing up, like I've acquired all their film for Harkey and World, and there's another guy that they're thinking about getting. I already have all of his film. You can assemble a line from the guys that Oregon has plus one transfer that is a good line. Like, no problem. I'm just saying don't go overboard and play two. That wouldn't be good. And anybody who's sitting there trying to fool themselves and thinking like, oh, Oregon's different. Yeah. Oregon could make it work because that's motivated reasoning. Every team that's done that has talked themselves into thinking, well, USC can do it. USC is different.
USC is
Ohio State can do it. Every team that's walked off this cliff has thought, I can do it. I'm Wile E. Coyote. I can walk out over a cliff and it'll be fine.
Well, what about the like other side too, though, right? Or is that what we're talking about with players leaving? What is the likelihood of a guy being like, you know what? That was a fun run here, but
we got a good amount. Luckily, they're leaving to the NFL. Is the nice thing.
We're aware of what the transfer portal departures are at this point. Like they're pretty manageable. They're pretty much what was expected.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we got like Josh Connerly is declared for the NFL. Marcus Harper as well, who's had like some up and down games. Nishad Struther, and then Johnny Cornelius just ran out of eligibility, I do believe. I never fully know, but yeah, I believe they ran out of eligibility. So that's like, that's 4 linemen who saw some time that won't be here. So I'm definitely a bit worried in that regard. But yeah, at the same time, like the injection of talent and next season, and like, I'm still optimistic that we could be a better team. There's just more up in the air, and we'll just have to see what happens. Yeah,
I mean, the reason to believe it's a better team is because every year Oregon's talent notches up, right?
Yeah,
like that's what stacking classes is. And I mean, while we're talking about Ohio State, like, look, man, that's what the way that Ohio State got to be Ohio State was stacking classes.
They got his look man voice on.
I mean, Ohio State, their talent, I agree, is insane.
And look, whenever they would show this graphic, right? Like they would do it during the Michigan game because it had been like 4 straight years now that they'd lost to Michigan. They'd show this graphic of like, here's all of Ohio State starters who have never beaten Michigan, and basically they would show their 22 starters because that's the deal. That's what, when they said like, oh, Ohio State's put together their like $20 million, whatever it is, NIL fund. Yeah. A chunk of that change was spent on getting Caleb Downs to transfer from Alabama. And I'm sure a chunk of that change is spent on Jeremiah Smith, although he committed like a year before. Most of that change was on those seniors not going to the NFL, just like we've talked about for Oregon, where it was like, hey, you guys, run it back, guys, come on back.
Yeah.
Ohio State did the same thing. And so like Tyleik Williams, Ty Hamilton, JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, they're all those great contributors to their number one defense. They're wide receivers. They're running, Travion Henderson, like, they're fantastic running back. Like, so all these guys, all these dudes that they would, list on that graphic. That's like, look at all these 4-year starters who have never beaten Michigan, point and laugh at those guys, that to me, the real point of that graphic was Ohio State had NFL players this whole crew of starters that were NFL players that they had to pay fat stacks to come back because they were 5-star NFL players who were a bunch of seniors, right? And this, I guess you could take away from that Ohio State's going to lose a bunch of talent. It will be interesting to write my Ohio State preview article next year, given that they don't rotate it all. Like their backups got like 0 playing time. So that'll be interesting. I guess you could take, a little bit away from that. But here, my point is, I was really wanting to talk about Oregon. That's the talent transformation, remember 10 years ago when Oregon was getting like classes in the 20s, in the recruiting rankings, well, classes in the 20s are like mid to high 3 stars. Right. And then like they sort of tick up and it's like, oh, it's all high 3 stars and an occasional low 4-star. Right. And then they tick up and it's like, no, it's mostly, borderline 4 stars and occasional mid 4-star. And then like, oh, they got 1 5-star. And like, it was like celebration. There was like, parades down the streets of Eugene because they got a 5-star, right. And it's like,
and then they transfer out or never play or something like that.
Yeah. And then, and then DeAnthony Thomas would actually, right.
Thomas, yeah.
Right. And then they built like a statue to DeAnthony Thomas, right. And it's like, and basically that's the story of Oregon over the last 15 years is that each year the recruiting performance and expectations like ticks up a notch, and through Mario Cristobal, I know lots of Oregon fans boo and hiss, but that's it, man. Like, or I know lots of Oregon fans are like, oh man, but so many guys had to transfer out of the program and all those, dudes were busts. Look, I've ran out the numbers. It's the same numbers as everybody else. A third of them panned out, a third of them washed out, a third of them were in betweens. There were tons of great, Panay Sewell, right, is a Mario Cristobal guy, right? Javon Holland, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like there's a ton of, those guys who were, great program builders who worked out, who were absolutely great.
3-star Justin Herbert, even. You never know. You never know.
I think Justin Herbert was technically a Helfrich guy, but anyway, anyway, my point is, the story of Oregon over the last, 15, 20 years is that each year the recruiting expectations, tick up. And so over the, Dan Lanning's, era, like, he's had, 3 full recruiting classes plus whatever that transition class was, the 22, cycle. Each year gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And you haven't really even seen, the first real landing class was the 23 guys. You haven't even really seen the 23 guys yet. And 22, 23, and even 24 has mostly been transfer portal dudes. And Oregon walked into the Big Ten, went 13-0, with basically, transfer portal guys and some freshmen. Like this was the appetizer.
Yeah. Hopefully.
That's what I'm saying.
I hope so.
This was the chef showing off. Like this was it. I'm sorry. I'm not coming up with a good metaphor here. Like this guy hasn't really started yet.
I thought that was great.
This is
really
coming out of
started,
chef school, though. Yeah.
like this, like he hasn't started yet. That's what I'm trying to say. Like Ohio State, the team that Oregon just lost to in the Rose Bowl. That's, Ryan Day he took over at the end of 2018. That was the Urban Meyer, thing. Like 2019, 2020, 21. This is like year 7 for this dude, right? That guy's been stacking classes, for this long, right?
And like very nearly missed the playoffs is the funny thing. Like has easily a roster that could win it and should win it all, but like wasn't far off from missing a 12-team playoff.
Right.
Is the other insane
so
thing,
it's like this is not just four classes stacked. This is, several of them, there's even one or two COVID guys, who are on his depth. Melton, for example, is a COVID guy. This is, double, triple stacked, of guys. Oregon's was barely tapping into the dudes, Oregon's 4 years behind, where Day was. Oregon's barely touching the guys that they recruited to build into what Ohio State was 3 years deeper than even starting.
And we did beat them this season. It was at home.
Beat them
early,
based on Ohio State making mistakes at home. There was a lot of stuff going, Ohio State got some breaks in that game too. It was basically a push game, as a 1-score game or 1 point, game means. But my point is that this is what Oregon was doing for its first 3 years was okay. Remember when I was talking about Jonathan Smith versus Kurt Signetti at Michigan State in Indiana, when I was talking about the twin tracks, and that my criticism for Jonathan Smith was that where there's twin tracks for program building, and there's the win for build for the future and win right now track, and that my criticism for Jonathan Smith was that he was only doing one of those two tracks. He was only doing the build for the future track. And it was check in on Jonathan Smith in 2027 when he'll finally have, built a good team. And just don't even bother watching Michigan State for the first 3 years, because he's not even going to bother working on the win right now track. And Michigan State fans didn't want to hear it, but then, oh, look what happened. Right. And then I flipped over and looked at Kurt Signetti, and I was what I like about this guy is that I not only can see this guy, working on the build for the future track, but I can see him building, working on the win right now track, right? Which the transfer portal lets you do, right? You can go, and then look what happened, right? Dude makes the playoff in the first year. In fact, the two teams that are going to be playing for a national title in 10 days are the only two teams that beat Indiana this year. Ohio State and Notre Dame, right?
Wait, that's confirmed? That's the national championship?
Yeah, Notre Dame. Oh, that Notre Dame Penn State game was also. We'll get into that in a second. We're going to talk.
So
about
anyway,
games and such.
That's my point. Is that there's a win now track and there's a build for the future track. And Signetti was working on the win now track, because he can walk and chew gum at the same time. He was working on the win now track.
I'm jealous of those dudes.
And so, that's my point about Dan Lanning, Kurt Signetti was. So that's what these first 3 years were, 22, 23, 24, in which he won, 10 games, 12 games, 13 games?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what? Yeah.
House money.
Mm-hmm.
The appetizer. Money. That's because the transfer portal exists.
Yeah.
And NIL money exists. And because, some leftover crystal ball guys exists, and some, freshmen were ready to play as freshmen or redshirt freshmen. That's the cobbled together stuff. That's not 2025. That's when you're going to start seeing, that's when he starts cooking the main course. That's when you start seeing it.
Absolutely. I am stoked to see this full Dan Lanning team. It's also if you want to, be a crazy toxic fan, that'll be an even better season for you, because then you can really be well, there's no excuses. And
I didn't just say that just to sort of hold everybody, oh, wait for next year, everybody, because I understand that there's that sort of a cliche about
there's some people that are pissed off that we just got our butts kicked. Yeah,
I know. I'm just saying that if you look specifically at the ways, where are the shortcomings personnel wise, yeah, it's the positions that are really hard to find.
Yeah.
Out of the transfer portal, like good luck finding a 6'4" cornerback who runs like a gazelle out of the transfer portal. Like you can't build your offensive line out of the transfer portal. You have to develop your quarterback, right? And so it's like Dante Moore, like Dylan Gabriel, can't throw past Jack Sawyer's arms. Well, let's see what Dante Moore can do.
Yeah.
Right. Down the line, if you look at the ways that Ohio State just out talented Oregon, right? Yeah, that's because ultimately Oregon's, Oregon in 2024 was a masterclass of a team that was put together through the transfer portal.
Yes.
And then it ran into a team that was built in a factory.
And hopefully we get those factory settings coming over here at Oregon. Now, let's talk about what?
I have one big question. Maybe there's no real answer to it.
Ooh.
I kind of want to just thinking about what you were just saying, but also like tying into the fact, how you were talking about how we should have switched the way we were doing our defensive coverage, right? To kind of force them into the running down the field, etc. And how you said that's how you would have been like, hey, you should maybe do this. Is that stuff that like Lanning is not really in the mindset of doing? Like, does he just kind of let them ride their own game, or does he step in? And does this make sense at all?
Are you asking like what's the relationship of Dan Lanning and Tosh Lavoie?
Well, it's like, I guess I'm curious. It's like if you're able to see the fatal flaw, right? And so you were like, if we did this, we get like a little bit of an extra chance, mayhaps, because we have to make them work a little harder. But I would assume the coaching staff knows that stuff.
I never know. I never know how to answer the question of why not.
Right.
Like,
right.
All I can tell you is, all I can do is observe both teams and say, I think this would be the strategy that would work best. And then report back, okay, they didn't do that strategy and it didn't, and gosh, it didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
And then I even get the sort of, I don't know if vindication is the right word, but then I watched Texas do the thing that I would have recommended and it worked better. And I'm sort of like,
right.
Huh. And so I kind of feel like, yeah, I think the thing that I would have recommended would have worked better than the thing that Oregon did. I don't think that it would have been, I don't think it would have guaranteed a win by any stretch of the imagination, because I don't really think that Oregon has the athletes to have, really pulled it off.
And all the injuries, like even Tez was banged up early on, and
and Jordan James, I think, took a head hit. It was another problem. But anyway, all I can tell you is what I think, what I see out of both teams, what the synthesis of that is, that's what the, analysis is praxis, recommends, report back what they did and didn't do. If there's a strategic reason that I can see why, they're not able to do such a thing, I can tell that. But if there's no strategic reason, and then you ask that, if there's no like actual operational constraint, they can't do this because they didn't have that guy, for example. Like, if they don't have, an actual hard constraint, why they can't do that thing, if they're just making a choice, which I wouldn't make, and then you're asking, well, why didn't they do that thing? I don't know. Like, ask their therapist, or their wife, or I don't know. Like,
the only reason why So the only reason why I ask all of that is because, you're also talking about like he's just getting started. We're about to start getting into the fucking first course. But I'm getting nervous because I'm like, but how do we know he's about to start cooking and that we get to eat?
I don't know.
Whenever we look at big games reviews like this, we can see that he's still kind of also making mistakes. Maybe.
I don't know the answer to that, Aaron.
Right.
It's kind
Nobody
of above my
does.
pay grade. Like, I mean,
can I ask you?
Look, it's also part of my job as an analyst. It's part of my job as an analyst in real life too. Like, I don't tell people whether somebody should get fired or not. I don't tell people whether or not they should build the pipeline there or there, or whatever. I lay out what the facts are, and I allow people to make those decisions. If people decide, man, I think that guy's been making a lot of bad decisions, he should get replaced if we're going to be a successful organization, that's for them to decide.
I'm just going to say this really quick, and I mean it 100%. I hope someday you get to be in the coach's room just to share your opinions. I think that could be the most insane situation. Oh, I hope you get that so bad. I want you in that room.
Yeah. I mean, as long as he gets that paycheck, baby.
No, I mean,
they got money.
One meeting, 3 hours. Go.
Well, I'm at the point. So I'm 100% backing everyone on this staff. I think they're all geniuses. I think they're great. I think they're best in the country. Until our next loss, then I think we just got to cut. We got to cut the whole thing. Everyone's got to.
What if we lose the third game of the season?
Then you heard what I said, didn't you? What if we lose the first game of the season? Same thing. Yeah, that's where I'm at. And I think a lot of
the first game of the season is going to be against Montana State, which is
exactly
a team.
Exactly. Burn it all down.
Wow.
So I wanted to get,
I'm insanely nervous. I'm just going to end with that. I feel scared shitless.
Well, this is the thing, Aaron. We are now at the point as a program where it's just at the end of every season. It's like, did you win a natty? No. All right. Well, then it's kind of a disappointment. That's a bad spot to be. This is a great season. This is a great team. It's just like just them, it's the bricks. But also at the end of the year, it'll literally be like, yeah, but did you win a natty this season?
Mm-hmm.
So yep, that's where
did you get embarrassed in the first round?
Well, yeah, but the first round was against Ohio State.
I know.
And
Hythloday said before we even got to the playoffs that they gave us the hardest path to the top.
Oh yeah, everyone except that. And like I think, I don't know. Well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the Final Four, if you will, of the playoff, because I think that's revealing for a lot of things. Now, Aaron, I told you that game was down to like 21-14. Ohio State, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Texas, they're marching down the field. They do this weird pitch that kind of blows them up. And then on the next play, I forgot to mention this, is a fumble, I believe. And then they pick up that scoop and score for like 90 yards. And there was like about a little above like 2 minutes left in the game. So it was essentially just
Angels in the end zone. Am I right?
Yep. And then also a pick to seal it. But that whole game was definitely a lot of making Hyth look pretty dang good about maybe this is how you should play Ohio State, because suddenly it was the Ohio State we had seen in Autzen, the Ohio State against Michigan, the Ohio State we'd seen a lot of times this year. Still very talented, but just like not a team that just looked a lot more mortal when you played Jeremiah Smith and Abuka with the proper amount of respect, I would say, which leads me to a different question, Hythloday, too, because honestly, these games kind of reminded me of the other time we had some high-profile matchups under Lanning's belt, which is the games against Washington last season. Different teams, obviously, but the thing that kind of reminds you of is like NFL talent, specifically at receiver. Did we play Washington in a similar way, with a similar amount of talent? How would you kind of compare what we brought to the table defensively against Washington last season with what we were doing against Ohio State this season? I know they're different, but I guess the NFL talent really makes me in receiver makes me think kind of similar.
My big criticism for Oregon's coaching decisions in the Pac-12 title game against Washington last year were on the offensive side of the ball. Mm-hmm. I thought that not the defensive side. I will answer your question, but
no worries, I get it.
About defensive criticism. But I had much bigger problems with Will Stein's offensive strategy, or I thought there were more significant offensive play calling and other issues. I thought they were playing the wrong running back. I thought they were attacking the wrong part of the field offensively. Given where Washington's defensive strengths and weaknesses were, I thought they were playing into Washington's defensive strengths and not hitting their weaknesses in ways that I thought were bad choices. That was the larger part of my criticism. And I thought that just the overall strategic contour of the game was Oregon needed to outscore Washington. I didn't really think there was a lot that Oregon was in a position to do to stop Washington's offense. I thought that they could do a little bit more to slow them down, maybe. But the Washington was basically going to score somewhere in the somewhere between 28 and 35 points, something like that. And that Oregon therefore needed to score like 35 to 40 points. And so, they needed to score like 5 to 7 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. So like the instant they were like punting to begin the game, I was like, Will, you've lost Oregon the game.
Yeah.
You can't be, so that was where like most of my criticism was. Now to answer your question, there was a little, I mostly didn't think there was anything that Oregon could do against Washington's offense once it turned out Penix was healthy. That was like the crazy thing about Washington's year, that where like, if you look at the statistical performance, like why did Oregon suddenly give a bunch of points to a team that was playing every game in a one score manner? The reason was basically it was like, I'm not a doctor, his doctor, but he probably took a rib shot probably against Oregon that cracked his ribs. And he was probably, and you could see it in his accuracy numbers where, about a quarter of his throws, he just lost control of. And then in the 6 days between the Apple Cup, this is where Oregon is cursed. It's a miracle that he got healed. Like I'm happy for him because kids being in pain sucks. But like this a crazy thing that happened, because never before in medical science has this occurred, where because like 6-week rib injuries are not a thing. It's bizarre, but he like got healed because he was having the same injury like related inaccuracy issues in the Apple Cup, and then he's a magic man again in the Pac-12 championship game on Friday. He's throwing accurately, and once that's the case, there's very little that Oregon can do, to slow that down. And once they're able to, Oregon then correctly, in my opinion, chose their defensive strategy to defend those things. And then there's a bunch of like Oregon fans kind of freaked out about Dylan Johnson running the ball. They shouldn't. He was basically getting 3-yard runs. Of course, he was getting 3-yard runs. Jordan Birch was out in that game, and their safeties were playing back against the pass. Like, what would you have them do? Play down in the box? They would be giving up massive touchdowns, you morons. so anyway, like their defensive strategy in that game was appropriate. To the extent that I have some criticism, I didn't like their defensive back rotation, or to be more specific, their lack of defensive back rotation. They should not have been playing Tysheem Johnson up on the line in press man coverage.
Mm-hmm.
You saw that this year when they rotated him back, when they were stuck in this safety configuration once the cornerbacks got hurt and Brian Addison effed off to UCLA, where they were playing the same two corners on the outside and the same two or same three defensive backs, and all three of them were in a bad way. They had Tysheem Johnson trying to play press man and nickel. They had Evan Williams, who's good but with a club on his fist, and Steve Stevens, who shouldn't be playing football. And then they never.
I'm still amazed he's not still on the team somehow. He was so damn long.
And then they never rotated them. And this was all while they had Nico Reed on the team, just sitting on the bench. And as far as I'm aware, perfectly healthy. Like every game in Autzen, I had somebody with field glasses scoping him out to make sure he was fully healthy. And they never rotated him. And Nico Reed was their starting corner all year long this year. So I don't get it, man. He was a starter at Colorado and a Demetrius Martin protege. And I liked him at Colorado. And then he sucked apparently when he transferred to Oregon. It was unplayable, couldn't resolve their defensive back situation. It forced Steve Stevens to be on the field 100% of the time. And then his starting caliber in 2024, that seems like something's wrong there. I think they were making a mistake. So I would have preferred in the Pac-12 championship game and in other games as well, for them to have rotated in Nico Reed and have him play a slot corner position, rotated Tysheem Johnson out, basically have him replace Steve Stevens at the free safety position. I think that would have been a better configuration. I think that maybe would have helped things out a little bit. There's at least one pass in that Pac-12 championship game, which is just straight up on Tysheem Johnson cannot cover that dude.
Yeah.
But I don't know if Nico Reed could have either. That's a counterfactual that I can't answer. So
I get you. Sorry to sidetrack you. I just thought there was some. I wanted to know your thoughts on that.
If you're looking for evidence of Tosh Lupoi making bad decisions, 2024, the Maryland game, we talked about it this year where his blitz strategy, replicated Danton Lynn's, game losing blitz strategy against Maryland. But look, this is, all of.
I get what you mean.
All of these things are playing with sort of talent that Dan Lanning, coached national championship, but both Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoi coached national championship teams at Georgia and Alabama, where they had been stacking, 5 stars, and they were, playing with full hands. There's a reason why poker players, fold, and then go all in, when they've got a good hand. Evaluate the poker player, when he's got a full hand.
That's actually a fascinating way to put it too. Actually, that really clears up the muckiness in my brain, which is that because they got to play with the full hand first, they know exactly what it takes to get back to that full hand, and so now they're starting a new game, and we're just going to keep playing.
What you saw was that they were really good at putting together and very good at playing with a transfer based, group. They also were really good at assembling, 5-star high school recruits. And you saw in, 2021 for Lanning and 2018 for Lupoi, winning national championships with high school based, groups. And, so now let's see it at Oregon. Yet have I had criticism in certain games for certain, decision, making that they've done? Yeah, certainly. Does that mean that I think that they should be fired? Not at this point.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm so far away from anyone getting fired.
Yeah, unless they lose one game. I agree with you, Aaron.
Yeah, I'm like,
I mean, I've watched other coaches, where, not for other teams in which having evaluated, the evidence, where I thought they did have a full hand, and I thought that there was, look, there's no excuse for this. You had the tools that you need. You made a fireable, offense. You've actually made multiple fireable offenses. And there's no excuse for this. You are the problem. You need to go, and I've said that. Like, I don't think this is that situation.
Well, so this is a good transition, actually, for the other Final Four game, if you will. Penn State kind of chokes. I mean, it was a good game, Penn State versus Notre Dame, back and forth. It was the classic Penn State game you've seen. I don't think
this was a good game.
I mean,
you don't think it was a good game?
Close.
No.
The score was close, but it wasn't even. Yeah, like it was. It was thrilling that, like, you assumed Penn State, like you were saying, has, like, you got a full hand. Like, James Franklin's been there for so damn long. All you got to do is beat a Notre Dame team and you go to the national championship. And they kind of just choke it away. Drew Aller just. I
mean, it was infuriating because, remember what we talked about when Oregon played Penn State, about how they're, we interviewed Andrew and Vince when we talked about, like, look, Penn State's this super efficient offense and they have certain plays that are like impossible to defend. But it's an irrational offense because they play at the super slow pace of play.
Yeah.
And
playing Oregon. Yes.
Well, that's the punchline. Like, they play at a super low pace of play. Aller is reluctant to throw the ball down the field, and they bust out their undefendable plays in situations where they were already going to pick it up because they've got a great offensive line and great running backs. And but if they rationalized their offense, if they picked up the pace of play, they had Aller push, the ball down the field in appropriate situations, and they used their Kotelnicki plays in situations where they needed the help, that this could be like this really awesome offense. And I was terrified of them rationalizing their offense. And then they did it for one game. They did it in the Pac-12 championship, or excuse me, the Big Ten championship game. They scared the hell out of the Ducks. And then I was like, well, look, and then they're going to look at the playoff path that they're on.
Yeah,
the playoff path that they're on is against SMU, Boise State, Georgia, and Notre Dame, in which they're not going to be scared by any of those offenses. And they're going to go, because it's James Franklin, who dispositionally wants to do the boa constrictor thing, is going to go right back to punching himself in the nuts. In 4 straight. And that was exactly what we saw.
It felt like it's exactly. Just like, if that's the kind of game you want to play, then it'll just take one bad break.
Exactly.
For the other team to win.
Exactly, Adam. Exactly, Adam. That's why I kept saying no game theorist would ever choose this strategy, because it builds too much variance into the game, and all it takes is, exactly as you said, when you build that much when you play at that low pace of play and low scoring rate, then all it takes is one mistake.
And it could have been a national championship game, Penn State, Ohio State, which I probably would have been much more excited about, because I would
have been a little more at peace with, because it would have been like, oh, look, it's the Oregon Bowl, week 3.
Like, either way, it's like, wow, we beat both of these teams. Obviously, Ohio State just humiliated us, but, like, we have beaten both these teams. We're in the conference of these teams. We won this conference. That's a very cool thing. It'd also be a funny storyline if, like, James Franklin won a national championship out of nowhere. But instead, we have a Notre Dame Ohio State matchup. Do you I could see how this game would be close. And, like Notre Dame, if they're taking all the right lessons, they should have an answer.
I think Notre Dame's defense could do something similar to what Texas's defense did, but Notre Dame's offense doesn't have the same tools that Texas did.
I agree exactly with that. And it would take something kind of anomalous offensively.
I mean, basically, like they would need to pursue a similar strategy, like force Ohio State to go on long drives and therefore commit mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And like basically, just like what I was recommending, and then Texas actually did, which is, make them go on long drives, hope that they commit mistakes. They do then commit mistakes, and then not only those, and then for those mistakes to not just be like penalties that kill drives, but to be like turnovers. And then, for those turnovers to, turn into points for Notre Dame. That's their win scenario, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the only way that this is an interesting national title, because if it's just Ohio State just winning in any way, then...
I mean, if it just turns into a rock fight, I still like Ohio State in the rock fight.
Yes, because they played that game and they've only lost it like one time. And Michigan has some magic powers this season.
Yeah,
it'll be and it'll be good for Oregon. I mean, who cares at this point? But it'd be good for Ohio State to be the national title.
Yeah, it makes it feel better, right?
I mean, honestly, the Big Ten's been cleaning up in bowl season. You want to use this as a transition to talk about bowl season? Like, this has been sort of the revenge of the North, right? Like the SEC and the ACC and even a lot of the Southern teams in the Big 12 have just looked like just total duds.
I mean, hell, except for Arizona State, who's the true national champion. I've got a list. We picked quite a few bowl games. Every Big Ten game. We were not going through all these, but every Big Ten game, obviously, and a few other ones I thought were fun. So here were
I did real bad this bowl season. Oh my goodness.
Well, you kind of did, but also spoiler alert, you did better than Aaron and I.
Oh boy,
awesome.
But there were some interesting choices here. Where we got here's a list of where all of us got these games wrong. Like all three of us chose these games. We all got them wrong. We all went with Washington over Lawville. And this game actually was Washington rallying back to even make this it was a close game. Technically, I think it was a 1-point game. 35-34. And that was Damon Williams just coming out, throwing heaters left and right. I really feel like I was surprised by this game almost more than anything else because number one, I did not believe in Louisville's, basically I thought that Washington's defensive strategy, which is basically let your dumb quarterback make mistakes, and Louisville's playing like a backup quarterback. I thought that would have worked, and then it didn't. Like, that's how bad Washington's. Like, I feel like Washington should have felt like absolute garbage about this defensive performance, and really nervous about next year on that basis, especially because with Walters coming in as their defensive coordinator, who's going to demand those dudes play man coverage. Oh shoot, if those dudes can't play zone against a backup quarterback, they sure as shit can't handle Walters' defense. And then you definitely shouldn't feel good about Fish because I feel like they had multiple scoring opportunities that they blew because they didn't just hand Jonah Coleman the ball to run it in. And red zone offense has been pretty rough.
Yeah. I mean, it felt like that was a first half of the season problem that they kind of got over. They specifically kind of got over it by just handing Jonah Coleman the ball. He got multiple touchdowns against USC and UCLA that way. And then it was revenge of the Fish. It was like the Rutgers game all over again, where he couldn't score in the red zone and kept making dumb Jed Fish mistakes. And I was like, oh boy, Washington probably should have. I don't have this in front of me, but I feel like Washington easily gave up 14 points on Jed Fish mistakes.
Mm-hmm. This is a game we all got wrong. Also probably kind of one of the most thrilling results biggest marquee game in just the bowls, probably. Alabama loses to Michigan 19-13. And it was really entertaining because like Alabama really only is like a one-trick pony. They still have some talent, but it was just like they're a rough watch a lot of weeks. Michigan's got one thing they do too, really. I mean, they got a really solid defense and like honestly really terrible offense.
Is Alabama's issue these days that they haven't updated their gameplay since
I
big boy
think
football
they
was...
lost. Kalen DeBoer, like Washington's old coach, is now their head coach. He's replacing Nick Saban, the GOAT. They lost some talent in that transition, basically. And I didn't watch enough Alabama football to really know what their problem is. But right now they got a quarterback that's a lot more comfortable running than throwing. And the whole thing
ain't good.
He's a good runner, though.
I actually have a little bit of kind of weird insight. So Oregon took a transfer in between the Rose Bowl and right now. His name is Malik Benson. He's a wide receiver. He most recently played for Florida State, but the year before he played for Alabama in 2023, last year under Nick Saban. So I got both years of film, 23 Alabama, 24 Florida State. I actually hadn't watched that much Alabama 23 film. I still haven't watched it yet, but I assembled all the play-by-play for it, and I ran out what their numbers were preliminarily. What's really interesting is Jalen Milroe in 2023 had the highest passer rating of any returning FBS quarterback. He was the one guy who had a better passer rating than Dylan Gabriel did. And so I was sort of like, this guy must be a good quarterback. And then having just done this project, like just 5 minutes ago, this project for Malik Benson and put together their numbers, I found out what the reason why. It's because basically he attempts like maybe like 10 passes a game. And like Alabama was nothing but a running team in 2023. And Milroe would like occasionally throw the ball. And when he did, they'd be like for 60 yards. And so it was like very, very few incompletions. Right. It's like, and that's why his passer rating is super high. It's like, very few passes, very few incompletions. And when they do connect, they're for huge yardage. That's a recipe for having a sky high passer rating.
Yeah.
Right. Like passer rating hates it when you're a volume passer and a ton of incompletions. So it's like a bunch of 6-yard passes and a bunch of 0-yard passes and, multiplied times 1 million passes a game. So anyway, oh boy. I'm not here to say that Milroe is a bad quarterback. I still haven't actually watched enough film on him to tell you whether he's a bad quarterback or not, but I will definitely, I'm equipped to say, having run those numbers, this is not a fit for Kalen DeBoer. Like if you're wondering how Kalen DeBoer went from running, this offense, which was the terror of college football, and then got a quarterback who had the number 1 returning passer rating. And then how do these two things not work? Like how did Alabama become a crummy, offense that doesn't go anywhere? It's because he didn't because Jalen Milroe's not, equipped to do that. And like, that was a big mystery for me. Like, how could this guy have a high passer rating and then not work with DeBoer's passing system? Well, it's because Kalen DeBoer's passing system required, it's based on much of like pre-snap reads in order to identify the structure of the passing defense prior to the snap so that you know exactly where to go with the ball. And like, I think it's probably the case that Milroe is just not equipped to do that. Like, and that DeBoer will probably have a good offense at Alabama again, but he's going to have to get like a quarterback that really works for his system.
It's growing
And
pains right now. Yeah. And
Yeah,
and this
like-
offense was the perfect wrong offense to go against Michigan. Like this.
oh yeah,
exactly
absolutely, yeah.
And it was like so they went like 19-13. It was actually a pretty great game because everyone in college football roots against Alabama. And so if you're rooting for Michigan at all, it was pretty fun. And they actually walk away with possibly a great bad season, one of the all-time great bad seasons. You're coming off winning the Natty. You got all.
It's funny, like Texas A&M fans are like we're condemned to live forever in the 8-5 purgatory, and they're like slapping themselves in the back with the whip of thorns for 8-5, and Michigan fans are like popping the champagne corks, having come off 3 years, best 3 years ever in a national championship, and they're like 8-5, and look at all the teams we beat, 8-5, hooray!
It's like, we just humiliated our rival and national champion to Ohio State, and we beat Bama, and oh man, it's great. And then so another game that we don't really got to talk about, but that we were all wrong. We all picked Georgia Tech. How could we doubt Vanderbilt? Come on. In this year, we doubt Vanderbilt. But I wanted to point out 3 other bowl games that we can talk about. These are interesting because the games themselves are kind of interesting, but also because these were 3 games where Hythloday and I, supposedly the people that were paying more attention, we were wrong on these. And Aaron, the black sheep, got all 3 of these right. And I think they're
Are these the only 3 that I got right?
No, you got some other ones right, but these were like wild.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
Picks.
We did a shit ton.
We did
of
a lot.
bowls. We picked a lot.
You picked. You knew that BYU was going to blow out Colorado, and in fact, they did. You knew that Iowa State was going to rally and beat Miami to humiliate Cristobal.
Yeah,
Cam Ward only plays the first half, to respect to him, but
oh my god,
it's funny
so
storyline,
flipping bizarre.
That was really weird. And then here's another weird one. USC wins a game. They beat Texas A&M. That is right.
Yep.
You called those out. Out of those 3 games, which one are you most interested in talking about right now? All of these are pretty fun to talk about.
USC A&M.
Yeah, USC A&M, I guess.
Yeah,
I'm not interested in Georgia Tech Vandy at all.
No, either am I.
What was the other one you gave me the option?
BYU Colorado was fun because the storyline.
I mean, it wasn't
a good game.
It was fun. Like, I mean, the most notable thing about it was that the commentators it was a wire to wire just face crushing by BYU of Colorado.
And it's also weird that it's like a bowl game between 2 teams in the same conference. That's weird. And they didn't play each other, so it felt like, well, we wanted to see this matchup anyway, so let's put it up
it's
there.
because technically the bowl contract goes back a couple of years.
That makes sense.
And so Colorado was technically representing the Pac-12 when it was signed.
Don't put that on us now.
So anyway, and
it had like Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders out there. Like it felt like it was supposed to be a big moment for Colorado saying goodbye to this, a pretty solid season for them. But instead it was BYU coming out and just blowing the doors off of them.
Yeah, there's really just honestly, like the answer to I don't really want to talk about this game, but the answer to why it happened was just BYU is a better team than Colorado. Like Colorado was not actually a good team this year.
Colorado has got specific talent in moments that can look good in a highlight reel. But I think BYU just overall in almost every single roster spot or side of the ball is just
basically like like Colorado is not really any better of a team than they were last year, when they, started out 3-0 and then like lost everybody else. They're basically the same team that they were then, because it's not really a complete roster because like remember I wrote that whole article about Colorado in 2023 when everybody else was interested in just doing, circus stuff about Deion Sanders. I actually dove their roster. I wound up writing a more positive article about the roster transformation than I wrote a pretty middle of the road article. It was like, I like a lot of the stuff about the roster transformation, but a lot of the stuff, I thought was incomplete. I think they're going to have kind of a bumpy road. I think they're going to do better than the haters think, but I think they're going to do worse than the lovers think. For these reasons, wound up calling their season pretty damn accurately, because that's what you can do when you really get an objective, clear-eyed look at a roster that's that deep, because it's a pretty good process. And then that was exactly what happened. And then I didn't really do a profile of Colorado, but I looked through their roster, because it was out of curiosity, and I was like, oh, this is basically the same roster with basically the same guys. And they, obviously they can't do much about their offensive line. That was exactly what happened. They looked like they had a little bit better of a season. It was just because they weren't in the Pac-12 anymore. They weren't playing the best teams. They didn't play Oregon, et cetera, et cetera. They played, the Big 12. And if you specifically look at the teams in the Big 12, they played the bottom of the Big 12. They didn't play BYU. They, et cetera. So then what happened when they played, what happened when they played good teams? They lost to them because they were the same team that they were in 2023. What happened when they played good teams in 2023? They lost to them. So like, this was exactly, what happened. And as you characterized it, they have some good talent who can put together some highlight, looking plays when they, on a, times, but then when they play a team that's got a defensive line that can smash through their offensive line and put their quarterback in trouble, that's exactly what happened. So this is exactly what happened. The only thing that was funny about this game was that like the commentators just wanted to talk about Colorado.
Yeah, that was crazy. That was
come on, it's prime time.
Yeah, I guess so, but it's been a while since I've heard it so one-sided. Another thing I'll say that I hate about this goddamn conference we're in is I watch a lot more Big Ten Network things in my life now than I ever did before. And I swear to God, all these talking heads still come into it with the mentality of just being like, I watched the Oregon-Ohio State men's basketball game, and they still come into it like a good 70-30 split of talking about, yes, that's right, the home team, Ohio State, and like the good old boys, Ohio State, and these usurpers, Oregon. Like they still talk about the UCLA, USC, Washington, Oregon as if we are visiting teams into this conference. Like they still have a very much rooting interest into the team that they know, which makes sense, but it's just freaking annoying. It's almost like we should be in a conference of West Coast teams, but
I don't know, man. I'm kind of fine with it. Well, I'm kind of fine with being treated that way. Like I still, frankly, I still kind of think of it that way.
It helps us.
And what I really, I think with the story, like narratively with the story of the season has been the SEC and by extension ESPN, or maybe ESPN and by extension the SEC, just showing its ass all season long. Like all season long. And the ESPN crew on that Colorado game, certainly inclusive. And the whole thing about the television contract with Big Ten this year is no ESPN games. There, not a single one. Until the playoff, which was contractually all through ESPN and basically the bowl games, there wasn't a single Big Ten team, that appeared on, on any of those. And so it was like, unless I was watching out of conference games, wasn't watching ESPN. I was watching, Fox. Now Fox has their own stuff, but like I will take 7 days out of the week, West Coast teams being taken as these interloping invaders, as the narrative that I have to listen to the, corporate narrative pushing and just ass showing that I've been getting out of ESPN.
I remember it late, like in overtime, Georgia Tech, and all the commentators just being like, wow, this playoff team Georgia is really struggling right now. I agree. One thing you didn't call though, Hith, Colorado BYU did not have a fight.
Oh, there was a little bit. Yeah, it was in the first quarter, second quarter break, there was a scuffle.
Oh, okay. I was keeping a somewhat eye, and by the end of it, it was such a blowout.
It wasn't a bench clear.
Yeah,
that's true. But a helmet. There was a helmet. There was a helmet that came off.
Okay.
Anyway, USC, Texas A&M.
Yeah.
I mean, this game, like, it was the thing that was absolutely hysterical about this was, I mean, Mike Elko's a defensive guy. Like, he's the guy that they got from. He was actually at Texas A&M. Then he went to Duke and he sort of came back. And at first, it looked like he was doing his job. I mean, I think it's the first.
He was pretty dang near a playoff.
If I'm recalling this correctly, USC's their first 8 possessions, they get 0 points on 7 of them. It's like first 8 possessions, 0 points. 1 possession, they get a touchdown. Then USC's final 5 possessions, they get touchdowns on 4 of them. The one that they don't is another interception. It's like so it's like first 8 USC's, so they have 13 possessions, right? First 8 of them completely scoreless on 7, including like 3 of them are 3 and outs and 2 of them are interceptions. Just like completely awful for USC. Like, defense totally has them locked down. And then Texas A&M just quits. Like, they just quit playing defense. USC gets like, it's touchdown, another interception just for funsies, touchdown. And the final touchdown is in the final seconds of the game. In fact, they go all the way to the goal line. They get a delay of game with like 6 seconds left.
Sounds about right.
So I'm just like, oh my God, Lincoln Riley. And they're down by like three points. I'm like, oh my God, Lincoln Riley's going to do it again. He's going to botch it one more time. But it turns out, I think it was even like an intentional delay of game to like push him back by a couple of yards because they wanted to throw the ball and they wanted a better angle. I think it was an intentional, like I mean, that's speculation, but I think it was an intentional delay.
Wow.
Like,
well, if you're not going to get no line, I guess that's another way to do it.
I mean, oh my God.
Whew.
Like, but I mean, it means that it's like impossible to take. Like, was this just a Texas A&M total meltdown? Because that's possible. Like, Texas A&M
they
does
do it a lot.
Shit.
I feel like
was this Lincoln Riley can't call a game? There's plenty of evidence for that. He has 8 bullshit possessions, right? The 7 first ones, and then an interception in the middle of it. Like, it was, or is this Lincoln Riley knows what he's doing? He's got, 5 scoring drives in this game, and he comes back, was this, does Jaden Riven know how to operate this offense? I don't know, maybe. Like, you can take whatever narrative you want away from this game. There's evidence for all of it. Like,
modern Texas A&M is I like looking at them every once in a while because it does just make me think it's like that could be Oregon. You could have all the money in the world, so much talent, and then still just like kind of be like a laughing stock for and so they kind of humble me a little bit, and it makes me feel good about the situation we're in, where it's like, people want to rag on Oregon about just like, oh, they're just money right now. They're flashing the pan. But it's like, yeah, but we also we are getting some wins, constructing good rosters. Like, things could be bad. Plus, this is a perfect result because Texas A&M looked bad. SEC looked bad. USC also looked bad. But hopefully, that's a bowl win. We got to give Lincoln Riley 20 more years.
It's totally perfect for them for everybody to celebrate. USC's back and for them to start out next season ranked.
Exactly.
It's I 100% predict that USC will be like ranked 22nd to start the year.
I hope so.
There's nothing that the AP loves doing more than celebrating a disappointing USC season capped with a bowl win with like a, top 20 ranking.
Blue blood. Iowa State, Miami. I think this is also a fun one to talk about. So,
oh my God. I've never seen this before in my life.
Cam Ward, I'm not even blaming him. It's just this is a weird weird thing in a weird game. So, a lot of players like, this, like Royce Freeman, when he sat out the Vegas Bowl, a lot of players, I don't know why that was the first one to come off my head, but a lot of players will be like, I'm not playing this bowl game. I need to go to the NFL. What if I get hurt? This could cost me millions of dollars. I'm good. I think, and most sane people, it's like, yeah, these are exhibition games. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It'll give us an opportunity to see this roster, more thoroughly. So this is a good thing. What doesn't happen very often, if ever, is so Cam Ward, who is the player for Miami, he is the guy. Like, there's few times a team is so built around one, like the whole team resembles him. It's like big play or nothing, kind of scrambling around, doing miraculous things, every once in a while doing a boneheaded thing too. So he comes out. Iowa State, they're always kind of a middle of the road, pretty dang good team, but not great. I don't know. They're a something team. Arizona State beat them in the Big 12 championship, so there's some quality there. But Cam Ward, I guess I don't know if he announced this beforehand or not. I don't think so, but this maybe have been a big surprise for all the viewers anyways. I'm sure him and Cristobal talked about this beforehand. He goes, I'm going to play in only the first half. Like, not the second. I'm out in the second half. You're all on your own for that, but I am going to give you the first half. I heard there was even rumors where it's like, hey, NFL scouts were being like, we want to see you a little bit, but we don't want you to, play too much.
It's half a game more of football than Cristobal gave us.
Yeah, there you go. And so they go out there in the first half. It's just they kind of, they look like the Miami of 2024,
sure.
Good and bad, like miraculous and laughable. And then and they have a lead in the first half. I don't think they were like blowing them out or anything, but they did have a lead at the first half. Then they sit them, and Iowa State rallies back and wins it. And it was pretty funny. I do love it. That's another.
How did
situation.
the announcing team deal with that?
Oh, I don't know.
They seem surprised.
I had it on mute if I was listening, but it's a surprising thing. You don't see that very often. Usually it's all or nothing, or you would almost think when it's getting close into the fourth, you'd think Cam Ward would be like, I'll go in for a drive.
There was definitely a situation where they, Miami could have won the game if they led a touchdown drive, and could have used Cam Ward, and he was just standing there. Like,
he's right there. He's healthy.
I'm good.
Sometimes it makes you think, like, I get resting starters, but then also sometimes it makes you think it's like you've had this full career. You've played so many full games. What's one more drive? Like, I know it could happen. You could tear your ACL or something, but what's one more drive? Like, don't you want to, wouldn't it be fun? Like, I don't know.
If he came into my coach's office before the game and was like, I just want to play one half because let's just use the theoretical, because the NFL wants me to play a little bit more just to do some stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm going to play one half. If he walked in and said that to me, I'd be like, no, you're not playing at all.
That would be one coaching decision, and maybe it's the right one. I don't know. Maybe they get blown out if he doesn't play in the first half.
But like you said, it's
who
an
cares?
exhibition game. Who gives a shit?
Yeah, at least you'd be like, well, yeah, we didn't have Cam Ward. That's what we got blown out. We're looking for
exactly.
It also is like
disciplinary.
If you want to be really crazy, you should be like, give me 5 drives as opposed to one half, and I'll sprinkle them out, and I won't even go one QB to start, one then you, and then it won't be like switching back and forth. It'll be random, because that'll really get this defense crazy.
That's why you would be a great ruler with empathy, because you just found a win-win where I was ready to chop off heads.
That's a win-win where it's like, first drive, Cam Ward. Second drive, he's not out there. Now they don't know what's going on. 5th drive, right before the half or something. That's Cam Ward too. And then you're like, oh, I guess he's done. Like, I don't know. I don't know what I don't know what the right decision is for this. That's just the weirdest thing you could have done.
I think it's interesting. I like it.
It's funny. I like the Cam Ward experience in general has been pretty bonkers. I'm not gonna lie. I love Dylan Gabriel. I'm glad he's here. I don't think we could have done any better. But part of me does think like I wonder what Oregon would have looked like with Cam Ward as QB.
I mean, so much of what he was doing at
doesn't really match.
I mean, so much of what he was doing at Wazoo and at Miami was just out of structure plays.
Yeah. The large majority, they were a fun watch all season, but probably not if you're a Miami fan. But it's just so many games that he truly felt like when you're playing at home and there's nothing online, like when you're playing the PlayStation, he felt like that player incarnate. It was amazing, honestly. And it was fun. And Mario Cristobal lost, which I guess
that's the enduring image to me of the game is Mario Cristobal at the post game with a stack of Pop-Tarts boxes.
Yeah. That was the Pop-Tart Bowl. I forgot. Yeah.
I saw some shit on TikTok. I have to say I was kind of impressed with the shenanigans.
Oh, they're amazing, Aaron. And you probably missed this. I mean, I'll say this because it's kind of cool. Minnesota won a bowl game. They had overall a really good season for them. But the main highlight is because it was the Mayo Bowl. So they got like a jar of Mayo mascot running around. And I love this move. They keep saying, first of all, get these bowl games gimmickier and gimmickier. Because come on, they're supposed to be fun. So they had a mascot that is a jar of mayo, and they kept saying throughout the entire game, there's a celebrity in there, by the way. We're gonna reveal it, but there is a celebrity in that jar of mayo. And at the end,
a classic masked singer scenario.
Oh, it was exact. Like you could tell whoever pitched this in the boardroom was like, I mean, come on, Masked Singer is a huge popular show.
Well, they all have the same owners.
Yeah,
anyway.
Exactly. They have the same idea. So the reveal, this is a great celebrity for it to be too, was none other than Flavor Flav, who is seemingly sports mascot for America. If you saw what he was doing during the Olympics.
He has become quite the voice, hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but and also Flavor Flav, like you're trying to promote your mayo, Flavor Flav. That fits pretty well. And then at the end, crazy old PJ Fleck, they dumped a big old. I mean, they do this every year for it, but it's still fun to see. They dumped a big old thing of Duke's mayo on his head. Probably absolutely ruined his clothing.
It was surreal because it was like his bald dome.
Yeah,
like
it was disgusting.
I don't know how to describe it, but like it
bukkake.
Yeah, well,
it looked like modern art. It didn't. It made him look inhuman.
Yeah, it really did. He looked gnarly. And it's one of those moments where I bet he was like, I wish I dressed a little bit less nice. Usually I'm the coach. I'm the guy who's wearing like pretty nice clothes on the side. I should have. Maybe he wasn't planning on winning the Duke's Mayo Bowl. I don't know.
No, he definitely was. I mean, that's why he has like Minnesota has like the longest bowl win streak in the country. But it's for exactly this reason. It's because they always have like a 6-6, 7-5 season. So they always go to like a mid-tier bowl. But then PJ Fleck is like super into the bowl game, whereas he plays some opponent who's like, oh God, we have to do this.
Yeah.
So then they super win it. Yeah.
And that they did. And then I mean, we already talked about this a bit, but best team there's the Ducks, then there's Arizona State. It was an absolutely fantastic game. They kind of got screwed. They also were just playing with magic. Cam Scatterboo should have won the Heisman. We don't. Who gives a shit about the Heisman? But it's clear.
He's cool.
Cam Scatterboo should have won Heisman. Kenny Dillingham should have won Coach of the Year. That's where I'm at right now. They were fantastic. Now, y'all, so for predictions, I thought we'd do something fun. Who cares about the national championship? Ohio State's probably going to win. Also, by the way, Hythloday got 14 points for the bowls.
Thank you.
Aaron and I tied at 11. So
dang,
just perfect.
Out of how many total?
Oh, I don't even know. We missed a lot. We missed a lot. No one did very well.
We chose more than 20 though.
Oh yeah, I believe so.
Oh wow.
And like bowl games are especially weird when it's like when we were making those picks, it's like you never know if the starting QB is gonna be there, who really wants it, who cares.
Maybe he'll only be there for half the game.
Yeah. Yeah. That one we couldn't have predicted.
That was pretty weird.
That was so weird. But I got a prediction here. I think this will be this is gonna be a long-term one. All right. What year are we winning the national championship in football?
Oh,
Aaron, I'll let
easy.
you pick first.
Well, it's confusing for me because I'm a dummy. Because
let's say the season, because I know
the 25-26 season.
So next year. Next year we're winning it all.
If we don't, something's wrong.
Something's wrong. Something's wrong. Yeah, we lost a game.
Yeah.
And everyone should be fired. That's what's wrong.
Yeah.
If we win next year, it really feels like that's because Dante Moore gave us that little, because we didn't take too many steps back anywhere. We improved overall talent. We injected talent specifically probably in that secondary. Also, like Evan Stewart just is fully realized now coming back. But also, probably the main reason would be like Dante Moore gave us that X factor, especially sitting back an entire season, learning the system.
Yeah.
I feel like it would have to be like Dante Moore is a Heisman candidate and won us everything.
Maybe actually, okay. I just watched this super good thing on the Pistons being like the bad boys, but it talks about how they just kept progressively getting closer and closer and closer, and then finally, bam, they take down the Celtics.
Yeah,
it was so sick. So maybe that is, and based off of what Hythloday was saying. So this year, what we do undefeated plus division, and then we go down in the first round. Very rocky.
Yeah.
So next season, we probably go to the one that would take you to the championship.
Okay.
Then we get to the championship. So 3 seasons from now is 2030.
Wait, what?
Wait, what? 2025 to 26.
25, 26, 27, 27,
29, 30. So yeah, the 29-30 season.
I'll just take your word for it. 29-30 season is what that's when we were rating it all. It sounds good to me. Well, I'll tell you, Dan Lanning's progression has been kind of like a clear, like going up here, where it's like that first season. I mean, obviously, game 1 getting blown out by Georgia, and an amazing Georgia team, and then there was and like losing to our rivals. Next season, beating the rival that we should beat, but losing to Washington was really like the big crux there. And then the next season losing next season losing to our rival, but our rival who was playoff, near like natty caliber. And then this season beating all the rivals, beating natty caliber teams, and then losing to truly like when it comes down to like the bluest blue blood that you can get to, really, like Ohio, like it'd be like Ohio State, Michigan, Bama.
I think
maybe
our rise to the 29-30 season will be through a extreme counterbalance with Ohio State. They are the new rivals, and we will grind on each other. I think
it feels like it is written in stone. if Oregon
It's a
is ever
great
gonna
matchup.
if Oregon's ever, well, it's lopsided right now, but I agree with you. If Oregon's ever going to win the national championship, it's going to be by beating Ohio State, which leads me to my guess. We are never winning a national championship.
Oh,
the Pac-12 will never fully die because we'll never win a national championship, which means we'll be this torturous existence of us doing this podcast will have to always be here.
so
And it'll never happen.
So then your prediction is the power grid will go down before the Oregon Ducks win national championship.
The planet Earth will go down before Oregon wins national championship. We'll be up 42-21 at the half, and then literally a giant comet will come crashing to Earth, release the demon that lives in the center's core, and 1,000 years he will reign. That's my prediction. That's more likely to happen than Oregon ever winning a national championship. Hythloday, I'm going to need your guess on when Oregon wins the national championship in football.
I don't have a year prediction. I think it will happen before the heat death of the universe.
Hot take.
I do
literally.
I won't give a specific year, but I want to continue with the theme that Aaron was developing, where like it's going to require slaying all the dragons. So like it won't be in a year in which like, oh, it's just some like like TCU, gets another good year and they're the opponent in the national. Like, no. It's not going to be like that. It like all the dragons will be lined up, like it will require, so they will beat Oregon State and they will beat Washington and they will beat Ohio State. And then they will beat, Kirby Smart at Georgia to undo that. And then they will have to beat, and then maybe like the final boss will be Alabama, because Alabama's got to be the final boss with Kalen DeBoer.
That
right?
seems perfect.
Like how RoboCop, is a movie that's a mirror, right? Like each scene, is mirrored so that as you go in the beginning, you then reverse it like a palindrome, like. So the season will have to be like he has to slay each dragon in turn that has defeated him in the past. That's how the playoff will go. It'll be like Ohio State and then Georgia and then Alabama, like Kalen DeBoer will be tying, or maybe it'll be like Georgia in the end. He has to beat his old boss because that was the first game that he lost at Oregon, something like that.
That's perfect. I love that.
I see what I did wrong with my math, Adam, that you were trying to correct me with. Yep. It's actually the 27-28 season.
Yes, you got it.
Yeah, thank you. However, I would not be surprised as we are continuing that, and then we get to that season where we get to the game that you get to go to the national championship. After that season, I would not be surprised if all of a sudden it was an 18-team playoff, and now they've just set us back a bunch. And
I could see that. Well, it just like this year, we have this great team, and like if we were still even in a 4-team playoff, no guarantee we win. But like one of those spots is probably still has like a Boise State in it. And then another one has some has Georgia in it, who was way over.
Oh yeah, if it were a 4-team playoff still, the 4 teams would probably be Oregon, Arizona State, Georgia, and probably Notre Dame, and probably Boise State would get the group of 5 New Year's Six. They probably keep the New Year's Six system, and they would get the, they would go off to the Cotton Bowl or whatever. It probably wouldn't be Boise State. It would probably be Notre Dame.
That makes sense.
I
like those matchups so much.
I like that field. I like that field.
I know
for Oregon.
But of course, they had to make it a little bit harder just for this perfect season of ours.
And
I was on a different podcast. I was saying that it's just like every time Oregon has a good team, you know, like, oh, Oregon went 12-0 in 2010. Well, this isn't the newspaper writer era where we just crown any undefeated team as a national champion, and multiple different teams gets to claim a national champion. Now we make you play a game, and also, you know, it's against a player that we, you know, nobody else gets to pay players, but this one guy gets to be paid. So, you know,
or it would have been like Oregon, Texas in the BCS championship game era. Like it would just be Oregon, Georgia, or you know, like that. That
Oregon has a really good team in 2014. Oh no, you got to play Ohio State. You know, and they get to have 3 NFL quarterbacks on the same team. So, you know,
also drug tests. Time for some
Oregon
drug
goes undefeated. And also your best. You know, all your players are going to get drug tested. Oh, Oregon has a really good team. Oh well, we're gonna make everybody play like 3 extra games, and we're gonna take this team that you already beat, and we're gonna put them in the playoff path, and also your best wide receiver is gonna be out for that game. Like, have fun. You know, it's like, you know, like every time
you can even go.
Oregon's got a good team. It's like, let's up the bar here. You know?
Sabrina Ionescu is gonna lead a dynasty team. I don't know. Here's a
how about a global pandemic?
Yep. Which, speaking of, I gotta point this out. It's just too good. I have the Fighting Ducks number 20 Sabrina Ionescu jersey, and it just so happens to be lining up in a perfect way where it says Fighting Dicks. It looks like,
it certainly does.
Like, I'm pulling it up right now. Here's
well, it said.
Look at this. It
looks says.
It looks like a misprint.
I'm pretty sure that says
says
something dicks. 20 dicks.
Yeah,
I'm going to go with eating.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it says eating 20.
Eating 20 dicks. It's amazing how that lines up, isn't it, Aaron?
Yeah, that's
crazy.
Beautiful.
Oh, don't worry, I'll put it on social media. That being said, so for the rest of the schedule for this season, so we've made this announcement before. We have been weekly, multiple episodes every week since 2017. That no longer is happening because of y'all. We blame you, the listeners, mainly. But this curse will not end. That is the curse of the Quack podcast. Will not end until we win a national championship in football. So you can expect us to be back, just not back until football season. That is right. We are not coming back till, I don't know, the freaking spring game or something like that. And we may have some special episodes in the off season. So please keep us subscribed on your app, podcatcher, whatever. Also on YouTube. I mean, we got a huge bump on YouTube. We got so many Ohio State fans now. So please follow us over there. What were you saying?
I say it at the end of every season.
Mm-hmm.
And I really mean it. And I think maybe Hythloday could come play it, and it'd be great. Is just one game of Duck D&D. Just give me one more game.
That'd be fun. That'd be good.
Let Hyth coach a team that he wants. I get the Ducks. Hyth, would you do that with me?
Yeah, we did. This was during the I'm sure you've known about that. Well, during the COVID season, we created a version of D&D that you can play online like this that simulates
it really works.
Football.
It's really
Aaron's
works.
challenging you, apparently. So you can accept that if you'd like. Or not. Good answer.
I mean, if you're not an RPG guy, then yeah, it's not for you.
I'm sure Hythloday's battled in some dungeons before in his life. That's an assumption I'm willing to make. He was probably a cleric. Throw that out there. We'll see. But that being said, listeners, I know your first thought is, how am I going to get my roster reviews this offseason? That's why I'm here. Well, my guess is you got to go over to, I mean, this is a podcast that is absolutely worth listening to. That is It Never Rains on this podcast over on Addicted to Quack. Hythloday, what are your I mean, I'm sure basketball season is in full swing. I'm doing a service to Duck fans by I probably need to fully stop watching Duck basketball because I haven't watched much, and every single game I've watched has been like I watched us almost lose to Portland State. I watched us lose to UCLA. I watched us get destroyed by Illinois.
Oh, that was painful.
That was like, whew.
They had an awesome. They had an awesome win against Ohio State.
Yeah, I watched that game. I almost turned off the game because I was like, I can't handle doing this to Duck fans. Like I can't, like to lose to Ohio State again. Like I just can't handle it anymore. But they're actually a great team. I imagine the Quack is full on basketball mode. Yeah, and Kelly Graves actually has his team in not a hole seemingly right now. Like they seem to have.
Yeah, it's definitely been a good bounce back year for the women's basketball team.
Yeah,
they're about. They're about middle of the pack, in the Big Ten. The women's basketball team is.
The chemistry seems a lot better than in the last couple of years.
Well, honestly, I think that the team is about the same, strength as they were last year. It's just they didn't have they have a point guard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like just last year, like the injury situation was so terrible, which is, I don't know. Like, I think that Graves held the team together, pretty well. And it was just like some bad roster management problems combined with some bad injury problems. And they're having to dig out of, sort of the roster crater that, it is on Kelly Graves, he deserves a lot of criticism for it, but like the dude, the idea that like it was a toxic culture or bad chemistry or the dude forgot how to coach, like I always thought that was, BS. And so like the season hasn't really surprised me.
Yeah. Well, that's what I usually push on this 24/7, but ATQ plug your pod. Plug the site. If you're listening to this podcast,
Addicted to Quack is round the clock coverage for every sport that the Ducks play. If you put on an Oregon uniform, we cover you, including hockey.
Hell yeah.
The best dressed dudes in sport. The podcast is It Never Rains on this podcast, which we record regularly. All the writers at Addicted to Quack participate. So it's a pretty lively conversation about everything that we do. And we cover everything. So
I think somebody I know who lives in Portland, I'm fairly certain their daughter just joined the track team. This is her first year on track.
Awesome. There you go. Inside track on that.
As far as I'm aware, for most of the sports that Oregon does, It Never Rains on this podcast is the only podcast that discusses, track, cross country, tennis.
I believe it. I absolutely believe it.
Etc. Golf.
Golf. That's not a sport.
You bet.
Yeah,
that's a retirement.
The golf team. The golf team's our biggest fan. If we haven't covered golf in a minute, we get tweets, angry tweets.
Wow.
Hey, we were in Sonoma or wherever. Like, where's our golf podcast? Yeah.
See, that's because back when I was the managing editor there, I literally made a rule. I was like, I will never say anything about golf. Like, we could win the national championship, and I'm not even posting that freaking headline in the Quack Fix. I refuse to, even though we got a good golf club too. But Addicted to Quack, genuinely, like, Duck fans, you don't know how well you have it over there. Really, really good stuff. And basketball team, like, hey, we have an actual basketball team. They are a very fun team to watch, even if it sometimes is a bit too much thrilling.
Final question.
Let's hear it.
Hythloday, has cornhole made it into university sports yet? Is it official?
Not for scholarships.
I love that answer.
For tailgates,
Hell.
yes, it's stronger than ever. It's thriving. Honestly, if we've said it before, but duck hockey, now that you're in the Big Ten, maybe there's some legs there. I don't think there's been any kind of announcement whatsoever, but that would be the dream, in my opinion. Even if you got to add another sport to, like, you know, balance out the whatever you need to.
They do not play against the Big Ten in hockey. Those are
we'd get destroyed, but
yeah, no, that's where the that's where they draw the Olympic hockey players from. But it is surprising at the HCA level that they play at, like how many like big name programs. Like this year they played against like Alabama, like Colorado State. Like it's it is surprising how like they're playing against Arizona State. They're playing against Boise State later this
Arizona
year.
State's really good at hockey, I'm not sure, right?
Yeah,
and then we got the Battle I-5 every year. That's very fun.
It is actually surprising how many it's not just like kind of random schools you've never heard of before, but like the hockey calendar is actually pretty full of like name brand.
That's
schools.
The thing is, the potential's, I really do think the potential's there. And when you think about like hockey fans in the Northwest, like you got the Kraken, but for actual teams to support, like, and I think the Kraken's a good example of like how many people were ready to root for them immediately.
Oh yeah, half my block don't even watch Seahawks anymore. They're just watching Kraken. They're like, as soon as that team showed up, they're like, well, this is the sport that I actually want to watch.
Yeah, I mean, hockey's fun as hell. I really hope one of these years to be really fun. And I mean, it's like it's funny that you got like the whole fan base is seemingly ready to be there, but now we just
it was
millions of dollars, Quack, 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 y'all keep your eye on this feed, but we're all taking a little bit of a break, just like the great Dan Lanning. It's been fun. It's been a great season overall. This is why college football is such a tough thing to root for. It's probably going to end with an unsatisfying loss no matter what team we're rooting for, or like maybe, or a bowl game like Minnesota style. Like, it's good enough. We're having fun, but we're way past.
Or even if you win, you wind up covered in mayonnaise.
Yeah, that is right. We'll see you soon. Quack quack. Go Ducks.